Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today, and I have a super interesting guest. The first time her and I spoke, she blew my mind, and I was like, oh, this conversation is going to be so much fun with so much knowledge and like the best way to start off the beginning of 2025. So, Annika, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Thank you, Kat. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about all the topics that I love the most.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so as we dive in, though, go ahead then, Annika, and give us a background. Tell us who you are, what it is that you do, and then what got you into your space.
Yeah, so I'm an evolutionary nutritionist, and I'm the founder of Evolutionary Nutrition. And it's something that's basically come forth through the pressure cooker of my life and my experiences over the last, 25, 30 years. And like a lot of us, it's often the challenges that pushes us, especially if we're able to see, the silver lining, right, in something. And for me, I'm from Sweden. I grew up there and I moved to Canada in my late 20s. And the usual story, Canadian husband, and then I was not interested in health at all growing up, but I was just totally unaware. And my degree was in economics, and I was interested in my environmentalism and all that. But then I ended up getting into computers and like programming. So I trained in that. I did some computer networking, and then, got married and got pregnant. I had two daughters, just 18 months apart. And that was a big stressor on my body, I found out. So I ended up having all these digestive problems, stomach pains, after every meal. And I would like roll up the little ball, which, if you have kids, that's not very practical. If you have a toddler and a newborn and you're home alone, that's like, so I ended up going, doing tests and stuff and sitting in the doctor's office one day. And he said, you're going to need this medication. And, so I asked, innocently, how long will I have to take these pills? And he said, like probably for the rest of your life. And when he said like for the rest of your life, something woke up inside of me and this voice just screamed, no. So I went home and I looked in my bookcase, and this was back in the day when we had book clubs. You're probably too young to remember that, but you kind of join a book club and you get to choose like 8 books for free. So I had one book on health, and I read that book cover to cover, and I started making a lot of changes. Like when I do something, I don't do anything like I'm going to do this slowly. Either I do it or I don't. That's just my personality. So I made all these changes very quickly to how we ate, where I shopped. I discovered all these health food stores, and this was a long time ago. So, it was hard to find organic food. You kind of had to work for it a little bit. And since I was home with my kids and I hadn't really gone back to work to do IT stuff, I was like, this thing just woke up in me, like this thing that's been waiting. And it's like, yeah, it's time. I'm going to start studying holistic health. So I started, with herbal, homeopathy, nutrition. And then a few years later, I set up shop and started seeing people. And, that's how I got into it. So.
And I think this is so wonderful that, you kind of had like this moment, a realization where your body was like, oh no. Like, because I feel like several of us, like a lot of us, several of us, have that feeling, but because of the environment that we are in, or the people that we're around, or because we saw a doctor, we trust, and we just kind of like blow that little bit of intuition off. But what I find really fascinating about what you do as well is your nutrition isn't just like nutrition. There's like a whole nother level and layer to understanding nutrition for your body and how it works and how it operates with everything else. And I would love for you to give everybody a little bit of a dive into that piece as well, because anyone can have the label as a health nutrition, right, specialist or a nutritionist, but I don't think I have met anyone that dives into the realm that you do. And I want the listeners to understand where you are coming from with the depth of understanding that you have, and not just, that we should eat better foods.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's some general things, right? The junk food's not good for anyone, but then there's like what specifically should you eat? And my framework has three parts to it, and it's sort of the core of what has become evolutionary nutrition. And as part of the work I was doing probably about 6 years ago or something, it was a few years ago, I've lost track. Yeah, the years go faster and faster, right? So I wanted to do a bunch of interviews with women just to figure out, okay, what are your health challenges and what are your health goals? And most of these were women over 40. And it's a lot of similar things. I realized quickly that these women were really good at doing self-care and taking care of other people and taking care of themselves if it happened to be in conjunction, cooking for the family or a partner, or you're catering for, whatever you're volunteering, or in the office. That was so good. But then, when they're working or doing something for themselves, oh, I'm just going to have a piece of toast, or I'll skip lunch, or I'll have a banana, it's like, and then I'll keep going, being of service. And when it came to that type of self-care, they thought they were the only ones that struggled with it. All of them had the same problem, but they thought, I'm the only one. And then there was a lot of guilt. They felt guilty for what they were doing, and they felt guilty for what they were not doing. So they felt guilty if they did self-care and took time away from something, or said no to something, or felt guilty if they didn't do enough exercise or whatever. So this was something that seemed to be universal, but everybody thought they were the only ones. So it's like, oh, we have a societal thing going on here, and it's not that hard to figure out that it's, the patriarchy, right? That's we've been steeped in for like the last 5,000 years, give or take. So it's like, no, we need like a paradigm shift. Whatever we were doing is not working. So there's some of these books for kids where you choose your adventure, or whatever, or movies, even for adults. And I thought, the default adventure we're given here in life is the patriarchy, right? That's sort of the operating system that we're in, but it's not working so well for women, especially as we get older and we're on our own evolutionary paths we're often not even aware of, at all levels of our beings, in our bodies. It's more obvious, but also there's this inner thing going. So we can choose a different adventure. And for me, we can let go of the patriarchy, where we actually are made to feel guilty if we take care of ourselves, and we haven't been taught or trained by role models how to do this, right? So in my framework, the first circle, three overlapping circles. The first circle is self-compassion first. That's choose your adventure. And when we do that, we do self-care from a different vantage point. And it's not about, okay, so we may do self-care in the form of the latest diet that worked for our coworker or our neighbor or a cousin. But we're doing it so we can lose weight. And when we lose weight, we're going to look different in other people's eyes. And when they look at us differently, they're going to value us. So we're doing it for external validation, or that just to be seen at all, because society really doesn't want to see women as we get older, into our 50s, 60s and beyond, right? So when we can do self-care from a place of I'm enough, self-compassion for I don't have to worry about being enough. Even if we do the same thing, it's from a different vantage point. So that's where I started. That's the first circle. And then the second circle is the outer game. That's what I call it. So it's basically what to do. And, if you open social media or read an article or wherever, we get bombarded by information of what to do. This worked for me and this and that. And so that's usually not a problem, but it's usually something that worked for someone else and we don't understand. So when I work with clients one-on-one or in some of my group programs, I'm able to use something called integrative genetics. That's Dr. Penny Kendall Reed's amazing work to put this together. And it's really about looking at relevant genes, and we don't look at single gene mutations or SNPs, because that's how I kind of started with genetics, like, I don't know, 12 years ago, just because I wasn't feeling well. But it wasn't very applicable, and I'm a very practical person. I'd like things to be able to be used and implemented in our lives, and not just something that we can read about and be very interested in. It has to be relevant to our day to day. So with this, we can figure out, how do I metabolize? So how much protein do I need? We can figure that out for ourselves. Like, and how sensitive am I to carbs? Like, am I somebody who reacts extremely sensitive to carbs? And maybe that's someone who has struggled with weight loss and they don't know this, right? Or it could be saturated fat can be very inflammatory, but there's a lot of in health circles saying, no, saturated fat's great. It's not, you don't have to worry about it, right? So, and then you're someone who ends up turning on inflammation and weight gain at a very low level of saturated fat. And you start your day with MCT oil and coffee, right? So it's like you've had like half your dose of saturated fat, and then you don't understand why you're not losing weight or just feeling inflamed and puffy. So it's, there's so much information we get. So now it's about, we know what to do, and we can create a program around that has a lot more than just what we talked about. And that's often where a lot of regular nutrition or health coach advice stops, because here, eat this food, take these vitamins. Good luck. And that's how I was trained as well. But these protocols or these things we do, they're often overwhelming. And in the work I do, I expect resistance. And I call that the inner game. That's the third circle, is actually doing it. And this is sort of the juicy part where the rubber hits the road. And that's where the self-growth happens, right? Because when you say, I'm going to do this thing, and then if you don't do it, that's sort of the gap there. It's like, oh, we have something to work with. It's not a failure. It's just information. Just dive into it and see what's going on. What's your self-talk? How are you sabotaging? And how can we really, I call it like your saboteurs will show up in different shapes or form, whether it's forgetfulness or like can't afford it, or, I don't have time, those usual and other variations. But then we can also lean into our guardians. And that's often come from having a wisdom practice, right? So because we often separate the physical from the inner, the outer, the inner, but I think we need both. And that's really the world we live in. So we can go more into that. I'm just going to stop. And
it's so juicy. But you're right, though. There are so many layers to this. And a lot of us, and myself included, there's so much information that it's really easy to be like, okay, just what foods do I need to eat? And this says that we should do this, and this says that we should do that. And then that's kind of like the end. And then I'm like, okay, well, I exercise, I do this, I should be good, right? And what I have really found over the last several years that's been really interesting is being able to understand the difference between every single person and seeing how much your genetics play into that, which I found extremely fascinating. I mean, I remember listening to a talk one time, and there was a gentleman that actually was having this conversation around this with a company that he had started working with. And he said he was doing all the things that everybody said you should do. He was making sure he got his vegetables in and his fruits and different things. And then what they found out was one of the things that he was starting off with almost every single day was blueberries in, his cereal or whatever it is that he was having. And when they went back and actually did testing, they found out that the blueberries were causing inflammation in the body. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Time out. I thought blueberries were good for us. But I think that's what it is we have been taught this very black and white book of these are the fruits and vegetables that are good for you. This is what you should make sure you have in your diet, and not realizing that based on our genetics, based on our family trees and all these other things that play in part, yes, it may be good for some, but it may not work the best for your body. It doesn't make it a bad vegetable or a bad fruit. It's the way that your body reacts to it, just like different chemical combinations and how they react to each other. And there's certain things that you're like, oh, don't mix those things. And it's really interesting to me to see that there are so many more layers to this. And then at the same time, don't go Google this, everybody, because you will find so many things on so many levels of so many rabbit holes, and it becomes extremely overwhelming, right? I mean, and like you said, we have these societal things that are already put in place that we've been living by. They are the standards, right? And I think that we are really moving into an era where there may be some outliners that we can use, but there aren't necessarily standards when it comes to the body because everyone is so uniquely different. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of, this next step that we're kind of moving into is starting to understand what that even means. So for people that are thinking, I don't know what genetics even mean or has to do with the body and what I'm eating, can you give them a little bit of a breakdown just to simplify and give an explanation to kind of bring everyone together to understand what we're kind of diving into?
Yeah. So we have for a gene, there are two components, but yet one allele from my mom and or one from my dad, right? So, and one is called normal and one is called variant. The normal is usually associated with the positive aspects of presentation, and the variant is the one that often has the negative expression. So there are three things we can have. We can have two of the normal, or we can have one of each, or we can have two of the variant, right? So, and then depending on if there's a negative aspect, if we have two of the variant, we're going to be struggling more than if we have one of each, right? Or the normal. But then we have to look at groupings of genetics, of genes, I should say, specifically for metabolism, for how we detox. There's phase 1 and phase 2 detox. And it's important to know, are you fast or slow? Because let's say, for example, something like turmeric or curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, which is, common in a lot of supplements and in cooking and things. But when you start taking them at higher doses, that's something that will slow down our phase 1 detox when we're getting, toxins out of our cells. And if we're already slow genetically, then we don't want to take that. But we don't know that unless we look at it, right? So, so it's really important to know, like, it doesn't mean that curcumin or turmeric is bad. It's just not a good fit for you, right? So, so it's really and also all the information we have from the past, like with generalized information about what's good and bad foods. Like, and if we go really far back, there wasn't really a lot of bad food. We didn't have junk food, right? Because that's like the highly processed foods that has a lot of additives our body doesn't know what to do with, right? That's an extra burden. It doesn't bring a lot of nutrients with it. So when you eat something, you want it to be nutrient dense. So you get your macros, your proteins, your carbs, and your fats, but then you want the food to carry all these micronutrients and minerals and all these things you need. And empty calories means that it basically just has the macros, but doesn't have a lot of the other things we need to function well, right? And run like well-oiled machines. So so in a way, we can eat by season. That's something you can see. And it was preservation of foods, but it wasn't like really good or bad. I think that's really in the last few decades, especially like, I guess, as we enter the chemical age post World War II, when there's a lot more chemicals and alterations of food, and we have this thing called ultra processed foods. That's I would call it like more food-like stuff, and but then so that there's the general good advice to probably stay away from that. That's for everybody. But then it's the we're fortunate to live in times when science is really bringing us all this information that when applied, not like because this worked for that person or I just read about this thing. It's like you have to look at the whole picture, right? And look at the presentation. That's why it's good to work with someone and not just start doing it by yourself. So then that's when you're able to really dial it in for you. And when you eat, move, and live for your genes, it's something that's sustainable because it's a fit. It's like you go trying on a pair of shoes, right? It has to be very precise, so you can't walk in them, right? You try to walk in shoes that are too big or too small, it's not going to work so well, right? But when you get your size on, you can have them on for years. And it's the same thing once you start adapting and specifically like eating for your genetics, you're able to keep it going without that much effort because it's the right size. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I actually love that analogy. And I'm curious too, for people that are like, well, I'm trying to eat healthier, or I'm trying to pay attention to what my body likes and doesn't like and how I react to it. What would be your suggestion for those that are in the process of kind of moving into this phase that maybe they can just simply start with themselves as they're gaining more knowledge so that they can learn more about working with someone like you to take them even further?
Yeah, so a good starting point, it's often to looking at what you eat, like get rid of the things that we know is inflammatory, at least reduce it, because I'm not like black and white, because that's usually not sustainable. There are like things in our lives, but then I'm thinking about like the 80-20 rule or maybe 90-10, something like that. So most of the time, you're basically following certain rules that you try to eat foods that you feel good from, right? Because that's like our internal, we have to start trusting ourselves again, our intuition in our body, and not just saying,
Mm-hmm.
I should be taking this MCT oil in my coffee because that's what everybody does. And even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel good, you never make the connection, right? So, and that may not be a very good, they may be a good fit for a few people, but for a lot of people, it's not, right? So that's like see how you feel. So that's the what you're eating. And then when you're eating, like there was this thing, I think it was in the 80s, we have to eat 6 times a day, 3 meals, 3 snacks, so our blood sugar doesn't drop, and then we know that that's so not true unless you have, some serious health issues with hypoglycemia and the like. But for most people, if you have a, normal or healthy metabolism, like one of the biggest stressors on our body is digesting food, right? And to continuously eat, because when we eat, insulin is released. Insulin is a fat storing hormone, right? So if we keep that high all the time, we're basically storing fat. And then we're wondering why we're gaining so much weight. So that's why a lot of people see success when they don't eat as frequently. And that's such an easy thing to do, right? You just spread that out. And it's 3 meals, no snacks. That's the way it used to be. Go back to
Mm-hmm.
like the 50s or something. The snacking culture, it's a great business idea. And there's a lot of money to be made there, but it's not really good for our bodies, right? So I think, and then eating enough when we're eating and eating enough protein, but you don't want too much protein either, because that's also taxing on the body and the kidneys if we're eating too much, and it can be inflammatory and really stand in the way of weight loss if that's a goal. So it's really, so you have the what and the when, and that's like a lot of people can make a lot of progress if they dial those things in.
I love that. And that to me, that makes a lot of sense because I know that I did the eat the meals and snack in between as well. And I hated it. I'm sure for some people that they really enjoy it. I hated it. And then I did the intermittent fasting and, that worked for a little bit. And then I was like starving. And so now I've kind of found like this really interesting balance where for me, it's more about listening to when my body is hungry, right? So, like, if I know that I'm sitting more during the day and I'm not doing a lot of activity, I may not necessarily be hungry at lunch. And I'm like, okay, well, then I'll drink some more water and I'll make sure I put something in my system in about an hour. And sometimes, and my husband always laughs at me and gets on to me because I do this, I will not like go and eat a big meal if I'm like my body isn't needing it, it's not asking for anything, but what can I put in it that's decent, like do I want some cheese, maybe a little bit of protein, like, some type of lunch meat, or like if we had shredded chicken, or, just something like that. But I'll find out that I'm just eating smaller amounts because for whatever reason, I'm not necessarily craving this big meal, right? And so I try to really pay attention to what my body is wanting, but also the portions as well, where I know a lot of people that are like, well, you have to eat, like you have to make sure you have stuff in your system. And I'm like, but I've done that before, and then I feel sluggish, or I just feel like my energy is drained. So for me, it's really kind of paying attention to that. And I also know, especially as a woman, right, we also fluctuate. We're not like guys where they're a little bit more stable. So there are times during the month where I eat small amounts because for whatever reason, I'm just not craving stuff. So I may do like a smoothie to make sure I have something in my system that's got like some protein in it. Or I will hit days where I am eating everything in my household for like 2 days. Just leave me alone. I'm going to snack on everything. I'm not saying that's the best either, but women, that's like a whole nother level of listening to your body, where we do go through these ups and downs of how much we are wanting or what we are wanting, and how to be, I feel like, a little bit more aware of that as well, so you don't like beat yourself up when you hit those certain plateaus or down times. And if I'm wrong on any of it, please, elaborate. But I feel like this is kind of what has worked for me over the last couple of years, of just like really, really intentionally paying attention to what my body is wanting and how much it's wanting at any given time.
Yeah, so you may be someone that has a fast metabolism, right? That if you do your genetics, you may find that out. But at the same time, intuitive eating it sounds good, but I think for most people, it often doesn't work because there's a lot of imbalances when we decide to start eating intuitively. So the messaging we get around appetite and food, and it also depends on what you have in your house and all those other choices, right? But it really depends. But one thing that I'd love to talk about is, perimenopause, and that could be 15-year journey that women go on. That's interesting, right? And I love that the conversation is like it's happening a lot more, and
Mm-hmm.
and we can be open about it and understand how complex of a transition it is and how individual it is, and being aware of so many different symptoms that can show up and how they change over these years. For some people, they're in this perimenopausal stage for a short time. For others, it can be like up to 15 years, starting in their mid 30s, right? So, and uh, and really keeping that in the picture when new symptoms or fatigue or bloating, headaches, mood things, or just things starts happening, keep that in mind, and also that it's shifting. But that's what we see physically in the body, right? But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, um, what's happening is I was listening to a naturopathic doctor actually talk on this topic on as recently as last night, and I love her phrasing. She said it's like puberty in reverse, right?
Interesting.
So puberty is about hormone changes, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
go from being, you're an infant to a child to growing into our adolescence. And then we have the hormonal shifts, and and then we, as women, we end up with like, about 30 years of reproductive years, right? And the hormones that run the show then, like estrogen, is really loud, right? And estrogen is the hormone associated with nurturing and caring. And it's evolutionary. That's not all bad, because that's when we have our kids, right? And it's good if we don't just have them and leave them by their wayside, right? So there's an evolutionary purpose for us to be nurturing and caring, during those years. But society thinks that's the way we are. And what starts happening as the hormones fluctuates and estrogen starts, it spikes and it comes down, and that can be, lead to a lot of unpleasant physical symptoms. But also estrogen will come down. And, as we near the end of perimenopause and go into menopause, we're going to have stable hormones again for the first time since we were, very young. And it also means, yeah, it's about me now. And it's like, so it's like there may be confusion around yourself. Why don't I like to do this anymore? And there may be pushback from people in our lives, but you've always done this. So the rules gonna have to change because like we're done with certain things. We want to start doing things. Like I say, like in a way, when this, I call it the estrogen veil falls off gradually, like we have this veil and then it just starts floating off. And then we're back to, the core we were as little girls, right? Like we were feisty little girls. We weren't so, careful about what other people thought about us, because all that thing is about, that's part of the estrogen, um, it's almost like it's like a spell, right? So we're under to support reproduction. So, but then we're back to what did I like when I was a girl? What did I like doing? And start doing those things again. And we have to find ourselves because stable hormones, that's a good thing, right? And then we can, but that's what I love so much because it can be challenging in the brain, just the physiology going through these years, brain
Mm-hmm.
fog, a lot of things, but when we come out the other end, it's like I think about it like as the impact curve of a lifetime for a woman looks very different than for a man. Because for a man, it's very linear. They get older, they get out in the world, they have a lot of impact, and then they get ready for retirement, whatever, towards 65. And we're expected to follow the same curve, but it's usually not the same for women, right? We may start something and we'll get going. We're following like, and then it's like, no, something may happen. Like either, we have kids, we have other priorities, or maybe we, in our 40s, early mid 40s, very common for women to step off, the corporate ladder because they realize it's not feeding their soul. And that's when the soul becomes bossy. Remember, because that's when the hormones start shifting. It's like, no, I'm going back to school. I'm changing careers. I want to do this thing that's more meaningful, or starting my own business. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then women end up going through the whole hormonal shift. And and when we come out the other end, there's like a lot of stressors in that 40, especially, if we have teenagers, because we have kids later on average. So it's
Mm-hmm.
often like when teenagers go through hormonal upheaval, the moms do as well, right? So that's kind of,
Oh,
that's a
that's a
cruel
whole
joke.
nother.
That's a cruel joke. But when we come out the other side in our, early, mid, late 50s, wherever we are, like we're not ready to wind down, gradually like men are. Like we're just getting started because like there are shifts in our gray matter in our brain where we're becoming stronger, we're becoming, better communicator, leaders. And part of the work I do is really about making women aware and then empowering them. We have so many resources, right? And the world kind of needs people who can, like I like to call it, be part of the solution with a capital S, use your resources, your connections, your financial resources to figure out what is in alignment with what's meaningful to you. And that's often like our purpose on a higher level, like on a soul level, what really gives us meaning. And we can give without sacrificing, right? Because a lot of giving we do during younger decades may feel like sacrifice because it's taking, and we're not giving from that place, we're giving from this higher octave. And that's when you're truly of service. It can be leaders in this new world that we're creating, especially over the next 20 years or so. So it's
I love this. It's like we get to hit the new level. I do. It's actually really interesting, and I appreciate you bringing this up too because I feel like I've talked to a lot of women that are in different stages of their life, but there is a commonality of feeling like once my kids are grown and everybody is done and I'm not having to nurture and like I am taking care of myself, what do I do now? And it's really interesting that you bring this beautiful piece of value and information of like, this is where you get to step into the next level. Like, this isn't the end of your life. This is like the beginning of the next stage of the more of the me stage. And I think that's a beautiful testament that women need to be aware of because I think that we tie ourselves to who we are when we're married or when we're with a partner, when we have children. And as those paradigms start to shift and people grow up and everything like that, we want to stay put with those old beliefs, those old beings, those old feelings, when in reality, it's like, no, that door is closed. We get to open up this one and we get to explore all over again. So I think that this is a beautiful testament and a great reminder to women that are out there that, like, it's not over yet. For a lot of you, it's just beginning, and it gets to be even more exciting than the first few chapters or whatever it was in your life. This is not the end. And I think that I just find that really exhilarating. I feel like now I want to go tell like everybody that I know that's like in their 50s to be like, guess what? The veil has come off. You now get to I love it. I absolutely love it because, when you think about it, you always think of, I attest it to when men have what they call their midlife crisis. And so that's kind of like their stage of like buying the sports car and like doing something different. I almost kind of feel like that's kind of what it is for us, but it's in a more meaningful way. Sorry guys, no offense to you, but I feel like it's in a more meaningful way because we're starting to regain who it is that we truly are, and we get to start taking off all the labels that we've had for years because of certain situations and parenting or all of that. And now we get to create the next label that we choose to have on ourselves. And how cool is that to get to relabel yourself without having to, completely start over or take a bunch of pills to figure it out. Like, you get to re-explore life, but in a age where there's a lot more knowledge and experience behind it. And like you said, kind of letting go of that caring what people think or how they see me kind of vibe. And really getting to like lean back into you.
Yeah, and knowing that it's not binary, right? It's not like, okay, everybody's moved out now, we're empty nested, now I'm starting. Because I think we have to start doing it when the knock comes on the door, right? Uh, and it happens usually in our 40s, right? So just starting, and if we don't know, and often if we don't know that we're going to have these physical symptoms that we're having, we don't realize it's part of the hormonal shift because people haven't known because it's so many different symptoms. But if we can be just as raising awareness, if this is going to happen, it can look so many different ways. So you don't have to wonder, where did I go? Who am I now? Like, what's going on? And if you know these things are going to happen physically, and then it's really important because some of these things can be very disruptive. So it's really important to support yourself, get the support you need so you're able to do this inner work, right? So, and being able to just start by, it's not like all or nothing, right? You just start by maybe letting go of some things that no longer fit, whatever that is in your life. And that will open up space for something new to come in. Maybe it's a hobby or something you just like doing for yourself, and doing it because it's self-compassion first without feeling guilty, right? Because you're in a way you're going beyond the patriarchy and you're being part of the future. And this is really important for, especially you have daughters, but for everyone, because you're being a role model, right? You're showing by doing and how you take care of yourself as you're going through these stages. And then it's almost like the big gift comes, once we get into this postmenopausal years. And it's probably going to be the most fun years of your life if you can get some of it a little bit right. Because it's not like all or nothing, right? Because that's such a black and white thinking. And it's like, and it's never too late, like how we start. And just being aware that we live in this world that's manifest, seen, and also the unmanifested. That's our inner life. We live in the outer world and the inner world, and that's the reality, right? But the only thing we've focused on since the Enlightenment has really been the rational mind and living in the physical world. Everything has to be measured, but just consciously living in the mystery and in the unknown and making that an ingredient in how you live your life every day, it's going to do magic, right? Nobody can tell you how, but it will support your evolution. Like,
oh, I love it. Okay, so Annika, I could talk to you all day. Like, this is so much fun. So obviously learning your genetics is going to be a huge component of things like this. and like you said, self-compassion and really starting to understand and trust ourselves again. I think those are two huge themes for today. And what you just said, I feel like is such a beautiful way to close it. But I always ask all of my guests, if do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, you know what? Where is that quote? See if I can find it. There's one that I'm going to paraphrase this one because it's so important. It's the choices you make that really shape your life. It's not, and the choices that build your habits that make the decisions for the path of your life, right? Not your choices. They have to go through your habits. So it's this indirect, I can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but it's like we think it's our choices in the moment, right? But it's the choices we do that establishes our habits that really shape our lives. And that's why a lot of my work is around establishing healthy or positive habits in our lives. And we talked about these three circles, choose your adventure, and that's self-compassion first. And then we have the outer game, what to do, and then the inner game, actually doing it. And in the circle, then when I show this graphic, I have this thing called like healthy habits that take root in the middle there, right? So because we need all three for habits to become sustainable. So we think we make a choice and then that's going to happen. But most things happens through the creation of habits. That's going to take us there. And that's a little
Ooh.
more of a longer game. And we don't like longer game. We like instant gratification, right? So
Oh, yes. I love that though. That is so true on so many levels, and definitely something I have noticed over the last several years is being very aware of the habitual things that we do, because it does
Mhm.
make the impact on what we do decide to do or don't decide to do. So, oh, thank you so much. I just love this. Okay, so you have to tell everybody then, Annika, where can everybody find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world?
Yeah, so my website is trulyu.com, and that's TRULY, the letter U.com. And on Instagram, I am evolutionary_nutrition. And on LinkedIn, my name, Annika Ek, Annika Ek. Nice and short. So, and yeah, and I'd love to talk to people if they're curious, because I love just chatting and seeing where people are and where they want to go, and then we figure out how to get there, right? So, and the work I do, I also have a community called Truly You Women's Circle, and I want to make this transformation accessible. I don't want it to be like only people who can pay a ton of money can get this, right? So, because I want to try to have something, because it's about being able to afford it, but it's also about the timing, right? So when are you ready to do this? So it's not like, and just being in a community of supportive women around you, because I find I do better when I surround myself with other people working on positive habits where we bond around our evolution and growth instead of, like, this happened to me, because tough stuff happens to all of us, right? But when we come together, we want to lift each other up, and that's how we want to bond and grow together. So that's a community I have as well. But that information is on my website and all that.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And of course, we'll make sure we have all that information in the show notes, make it super simple so that you guys can find Annika, follow her, get in touch with her, have a conversation. So, Annika, again, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today and just sharing all of this amazing information.
Well, thanks, Kat. And thank you for, giving space for me to share this, because this is like, it's my life's purpose, and I'm excited to, help the people I meet to find theirs and just make it happen, because it's that's how we create the world we want, right, for our kids in the future.
Yep. Oh, I love it so much. Thank you again so much to everybody else that's out there listening. I hope you got some takeaways. And before you go Googling and deep diving down the rabbit hole, make sure that you are following Annika and check her website out and reach out to ask questions, maybe have a consultation with her. I definitely feel like directing our questions towards a viable source might be a little bit better than Google sometimes. But I hope that you got some amazing takeaways. I hope that this this is kind of like your light bulb moment, wherever you're at in your life, to realize that you can always make a change, that you may have something better coming, or if you're already in that stage of your life, realizing that the veil has come off and it is time to have even more fun and learn about yourself all over again. So thank you so much again for everyone for being a part of the podcast. Thank you, Annika, for being a guest. And until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.